Wait, are we training to failure, or are we like lying down and eating popcorn?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. Today, we're going to talk about home workouts. I'm at home right now. Paris, you're at home right now.
I am, yeah.
Neither one of us actually works out from home.
Thank
for
goodness.
personal reasons. Yeah, for personal reasons. But there was a point in time, like during COVID and stuff, where we had to. And we also have a lot of clients who work out from home.
Definitely.
I think that there's a little bit of a stigma when it comes to building muscle specifically. Like there are different fitness goals that make it more widely acceptable to work out from home. Let me just say that. Or it's more common to work out from home when you have different sorts of fitness goals. But I think when it comes to like building muscle specifically, people get really hung up on like the gym. So today we're going to break down the truth of whether or not it's actually possible to build muscle just from doing home workouts. And spoiler alert, it is. But we're going to explain why and how.
Yeah, absolutely. People ask us all the time, and obviously this is going to depend on how much equipment you have at home. Like, let's say your home is, like Jeff Nipper's new lab that he built. Like, if that's it, okay, well, you pretty much have a gym in your house. And we do have quite a few clients, like Mark, Steve, for example, our previous client Cassidy, that had like a legit like home gym setup. Mm-hmm. So for them, they pretty much have a gym at home. But I think maybe we're going to talk a little bit more about maybe if you have like maybe a bench, some dumbbells and bands, and you're wondering, okay, can I still make good progress given a limited equipment? That's kind of the base of this conversation is can I make progress with limited equipment almost in some ways?
Exactly. I think that's exactly what we're trying to get at. And I also want to say that next week, we're going to do kind of a part 2 and talk about can you actually lose fat with home workouts? So what we've done is we've split this concept of, let's call it limited equipment home workouts, into 2 different goals. So today's focusing on growing muscle. Next week, we're going to focus on fat loss and its relationship with home workouts. So if that's more aligned with your goals, make sure you don't forget to subscribe and you check in next week because we'll have that one ready for you too.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, amazing. Before we can talk about applying muscle growth goals to the home or limited equipment setting, we need to actually talk about growing muscle. What are the fundamentals that make muscle growth happen? We've talked about this before in a few episodes, but we will just anchor today's conversation in that and then apply it to the context of working out from home or with limited equipment.
Yeah, like we're still learning a lot about muscle growth, but pretty much what we know, we need a few boxes checked, major ones being we need a sufficient amount of volume, which just means a sufficient amount of work done, and we can quantify as working sets and simplify it with like number of working sets per week. We need a sufficient amount of those. Can we grow muscle with one? Theoretically, if you're new to training, but we want to fall within a sufficient amount of working sets on a weekly basis. The next one is, are we training close enough to failure? So are we pushing our sets hard enough so that we're reaching the point where we're close to not being able to do another rep with good form?
It's like a way of evaluating like how challenging your workouts feel in a way, right?
Yeah. And then we need to be hopefully progressing over time. That's kind of the check boxes from a training perspective. Very, very surface level, simplified. You might have some more.
No, I'm just going to say volume, training intensity, progression. Those are kind of the 3 things that you outlined as like, we need those things. So with those in mind, can you hit those 3 principles with home workouts?
Definitely. You definitely can.
Boom. The podcast is done. We solved it.
Yeah. And
let's explain.
Yeah. If you think about it, you can make limited equipment still very challenging. Like, for example, if you take a Bulgarian split squat, right, you can make that very challenging. And you can also do things like limiting the rest times so that you'll reach failure with less weight potentially. And just making yourself at a more, I would say, biomechanically disadvantaged position. Right. So like the way your body is arranged, making the movement harder for the target muscle. Right. So your muscles have like in a position of less leverage. A great example would be like if I do a standing dumbbell curl upright versus if I'm like lying down or in a less advantageous position. Right.
So that's that of the 3 essentials we outlined. The challenging one is the one we're focusing on first, right? It's like you can still make things challenging enough to bring that training intensity. Has anybody listening, you're not going to be able to respond to me right now, but drop a comment below. Have you ever done a sissy squat? Anybody who's ever done a sissy squat knows that you can do it with no added weight and it's challenging, right? Or pistol squats, right? There are definitely movements, Bulgarian split squats, you said, lightweight feels challenging for most people. Definitely ways to find exercises that themselves feel more challenging without having to have barbells or heavy machinery or even just heavier weights, heavier dumbbells.
Exactly. And even, yeah, if you have light dumbbells, there's a bunch of ways to make it more challenging, like tempo work, like slowing your reps down, shortening your rest times,
Mm-hmm.
working the higher rep ranges. We know if we're training close enough to failure, of course, practical things aside, we could go upwards to like 30 reps as long as we're training close to failure and still stimulate the muscle in a way where it's going to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have like a 5 pound dumbbell, and let's say you otherwise have the capacity of doing like curls with like 20s for like 12 reps, but you have a 5 pound dumbbell, I bet when you get closer to 30 reps, even that will feel challenging for most people. Not everybody, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, for for some people,
For some
but
people.
the principles still apply. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this also leads into a conversation of like it really depends on your experience level.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're gonna
Yeah,
save that one because we're
yeah,
gonna unpack that in greater detail,
yeah.
for sure. Which teaser alert! But let's just focus first on like the three core principles for muscle growth training specifically for muscle growth applied here. So we talked about challenging. You gave a few ways that we can make things more challenging
Hmm.
from working out from home. Do we want to talk about volume as well, or is
Yeah.
there anything else on challenge that you want to put out there?
No, I mean, there's a bajillion ways to make things more challenging. Like even if you added like pauses, right? Like we talked about tempo work, we talked about pauses, we talked about shortening rest times, we talked about working in higher rep ranges. Like all of these things can make things more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Even yeah,
Yeah,
and we talked about exercise selection too, right? And
exercise
maybe
selection.
curating exercises that are more challenging inherently. One thing I do want to call it there is like I think we have this like stigma of thinking that making things more challenging means adding more weight, and we did a great episode on that where we asked like, do you need to lift heavier to build muscle? So we debunked that a little bit. That is not the only way. So go check that out, linked below and in the cards here on YouTube. But I do think that when you are training from home, if your version of making things more challenging is adding weights, there are some creative ways you can do that too. So during COVID, for example, when I was training from home, I would take a backpack and load it with a bunch of textbooks, and that
Yes.
made squats more challenging because it's heavier, right? Like, so you can, there are so many ways that you just outlined really well of like how we can make things more challenging. That is not just about adding weight. But even if you are trying to add weight to make things more challenging, there are creative solutions to do that too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. So the other consideration for muscle growth was volume. Do you want to touch on that one next and how you can replicate that in the home slash limited equipment environment?
Yeah. So pretty, self-explanatory. You can outline the number of sets that you want to hit per muscle group.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you don't think that you can create as great of a stimulus for whatever reason during your set, maybe you do even a little bit more working sets per
Right.
week, potentially just to make up for maybe, okay, maybe I can't train as close to failure. Okay, maybe then I'm going to add, a few more
Mm-hmm.
sets potentially. Or if you can't hit as many compound movements, maybe then you have to make up for that by adding an additional isolation. Like maybe I can't do a heavy press. Okay, but I
Mm-hmm.
can hit my delts and then my chest and then my triceps kind of with separate
Right.
movements.
Yeah. Instead of like the all-in-one exercises, if those aren't available to you, you break it down into isolation exercises. So you might be doing more sets in terms of volume, but the volume per muscle group kind of at least can be checked off.
Yeah, in one way, shape, or form. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the. And again, you can easily write that into a training program.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's volume. Pretty straightforward, that one. It's just sets per week per muscle group kind of thing. Definitely not something you need the gym environment to do. And the other one you talked about was progression and how
Mhm.
important progression is for building muscle. How can we seek progression at home?
Yeah, so this one you can make things more creative, like you said, using like a backpack on your squats plus your dumbbells, and that can easily be loaded. Or you can progress in terms of maybe this is the point where you do add sets. Even
Mm-hmm.
if your performance is equated, then you add like an extra set just to be progressing in terms of volume. Or you progress into ways that would make it harder. Like for example, okay, I'm doing normal squats. Now I'm adding a pause at the bottom, or I'm not locking out my lifts. Like those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things. Like okay, my shoulder press, I'm stopping like halfway up, makes it more challenging with the same weight. So there's other ways that to theoretically challenge the muscle more by through progression or just adding more reps.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on where you're starting from, which again, I know we're going to talk about later, but some people maybe start with the weights that they have at home in a certain rep range, and then you expand the rep range so you're able to add reps over time. And each week you see, can I add another rep? Can I add another rep? Until you get to that point around like the 30 threshold where you're like, okay, now I might be going too far with this. So that's definitely one way. It's just like even progressing your reps week after week. We've had a lot of clients who have done that because they've started with the basic intro kind of lifts, and they've done a really good job of that.
Something else I do want to add that you could do for anybody training at home is to pre-exhaust muscles first before you hit a compound. Like, for example, let's say you have a certain access to dumbbells for bench press and you're like, this is way too easy for this rep range. Well, I'm sure if you did 3 sets to failure of push-ups before, or 3 sets of chest flies to failure before you did your press, all of a sudden those weights are going to feel pretty challenging. So that's, if you're stronger and you don't have heavy weights, that's a great way to go.
That's such a good point. And part of that is like exercise order. So when you're writing your own training program for at home, paying attention to the exercise order. I'm going to go back to exercise selection as well, because I think variations of exercises can also be progressions, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, if you're doing like an RDL at home with dumbbells or anywhere with dumbbells, and then now you switch it to a B stance, right? The same weights are going to be more challenging because it's a unilateral movement. You're doing kind of one side at a time. So that could be one, just thinking out loud about how you can find exercise variations. Or if you, to go back to your push-up example, you started doing incline push-ups because those felt easier, you now are doing push-ups from the floor, right? So those variations can also be ways of progression.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So short version is, when it comes to the 3 core training principles for muscle growth, volume, challenge/intensity, and progression, absolutely, we can achieve each of those 3 things from home. No doubt about that. We've had a number of client examples who have done that really successfully and been able to build muscle from home because they've applied those principles. It starts with a structured training program. It starts with, their subjective stimulus on the lifts and the feedback that they provide, so we can make sure they keep progressing. So it's possible. We've answered the question. Can you build muscle with home workouts or limited equipment? Yes, 100% you can. There are limitations still, though. Mm-hmm. And so we do also want to address those. There are things that can make training from home harder to build muscle. So let's unpack those a little bit as well, so we can explore both sides of this question.
Yeah, so the first one is the equipment situation. Especially the main muscle group I find challenging with is for back, because you pretty much can only do row variations or like a dumbbell pullover. That's it.
Yeah. It's really hard to get the vertical pull.
You have unless you have a pull-up bar.
Unless you have a pull-up bar. And we actually talked about that in another episode, which was the machines versus free weights, right? Mm-hmm. And we talked about how sometimes machines have benefits of just being able to hit muscles that we're not able to hit with just dumbbells, right? Or free weights, because they're obviously set up in a way to pull from different movements and anti-gravity stuff.
Or prioritize different muscle groups, certain muscle groups,
Yeah, exactly. So definitely the equipment does have a certain way of dictating which muscle groups we hit and how we hit them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like the big one, I think. Because when I think about that, as I said, you can do like a single arm row and then change the grip on your rows, bend over row, and then pull over. Like that's it for back, right? And it is one of those muscle groups where you do want to hit from all angles. So that's like a great example of like, equipment kind of holding you back. So that's like the first one.
And I think can we just play into the equipment potentially being a limitation? The next one is just like, you can outgrow the weights that you have. Right. And we've had clients who have outgrown the weights they had, and then they're willing to invest and they buy heavier weights. But at a certain point in time, it is natural that as you get stronger, you might not be able to use the same weights anymore. And like we said, you can still make things more challenging. You can still find different ways to progress using the same weight. Absolutely. But there is, for a lot of people, a point in time where that becomes a limitation as well.
Definitely. And even just practically, like let's say you get strong in your squats and now you need like a 70-pound dumbbell on your squats for goblet squats. It's like, okay, now we just need a barbell in the back, just holding that up. It's probably not going to be amazing. Or if you think about the variety of weights you need once you start progressing, like maybe I'm using the, 15s for rear delt flies, but then I'm using, for just as an example, like 90 pounds for my chest press. It's like, okay, well now I need to buy 10 pounds all the way up, so unless you have the space, like that's also a limiting factor.
Yeah, storage space to work out, like all those sorts of things. Absolutely. I also want to throw out one limitation, which is the psychology of working out from home. I think like this is me personally, and everybody has a very different relationship with this. And I think it also depends on like some of the clients you shouted out earlier, Mark, Steve, that have like full gym setups. You can enter a gym space and be like, cool, this is my space. I'm in the zone.
Yeah.
For me, when it was COVID and I was working out and using my couch as like a pseudo bench and like, for Bulgarian split squats and stuff, I'm like, the TV's right in front of me. Justin's cooking dinner like 5 feet away from me. It was not an environment where I was able to like psychologically like lock it in.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like training intensity also being really important to build muscle, I was not bringing intensity because my head just wasn't in it in the same way, right?
I can totally agree with that. It's very hard for me to get in the zone. One thing I like about the gym is just the act of walking to the gym, my heart rate even starts going up because my body knows like it's game time. You know what I mean? Versus if I walk into like, the living room, I associate that with relaxing. So now there's
Mhm.
confused things. Like when I walk into my office, immediately I'm focused, like it's work time. If I walk onto over the couch, like that's my chill area. Now my body's like, wait, are we training to failure, or are we like lying down and eating popcorn?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Can you build muscle training from home? 1000%. Yes, it should not be the barrier to getting in the way of your muscle building goals, but it is important to acknowledge that like there are certain limitations, but the perspective on those limitations or how much they matter to you or to what extent they are, let's say, a potential hindrance or potential limit is so individual. Let's now explore the individual context that makes training from home or training with limited equipment kind of more or less valid.
Yeah, I first want to say like the people who usually ask the question tend to maybe more of the time be beginners.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the people that can actually see the most progress working out from home and don't need to worry as much about, specific equipment or all these things that we're talking
Yeah.
about. They just
Yeah.
need to get started and
Yeah.
apply some tension on the muscle, right?
Yes.
So
Let's not forget that number one goal for fitness, period, before we talk about building muscle is like be moving, be active, do some
mhm,
form of resistance training,
yeah,
right? That is the goal for most people.
yeah,
And yeah, so if you're not doing that, absolutely start from home. And that's also, I'm going to shout us out again. We did our episode on how can you get started in the gym. Step
yeah,
number 1 was actually work out from home in that
yeah.
episode.
It seriously makes the barrier to entry because the biggest thing that people talk about is time or
Mhm.
busyness or other responsibilities, etc. It's like
Or
you can do.
gym intimidation or the gym anxiety that we spoke about in
Yeah,
that
it's
episode too,
like
right?
if you're a beginner, you will respond quickly to literally any stimulus above zero.
Hmm.
So it's like you don't need to worry about, oh, I'm not going to start because I don't have the most optimal equipment. It's like it doesn't freaking matter. Worry
Just
about that
start.
stuff later. Just get in the in
Yeah,
the, in
just
the
start.
game, right?
Yeah. So first piece of individual context is like anybody who just needs to get moving and wants to start resistance training, just do it. Just do it. You do not need to worry about things being optimal. But as you do, I know the term that's been thrown around before is like training age, and I actually heard, I think it was on the Iron Culture podcast with Eric Helms and Eric Trexler who were speaking about it. They actually replaced the term training age with training status because people got
Mm,
so hung up on like how many years they've been lifting that they didn't actually think about like where are they in the trajectory of like training progressively or with good training principles
yeah,
and things like that. So I'm going to say training status.
that's I like that because there's some there's some people who have been training for years. You even see them at the gym. They do the same workouts and they look the same. They haven't progressed. They're still a beginner. And I'm sorry this is going to hurt some feelings, but there are a lot of people who have been lifting for like years and are still actually a beginner in their journey.
Yeah, they
Take
just
that in
don't have all
perspective.
the variables dialed in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So
So, training status, we're going to say. So, beginner, intermediate, advanced, in terms of, I would say, the precision and structure of your training.
yeah, and like if you paint a picture of like towards your Gen X ceiling, like we have that
Yeah,
kind of
the curve.
asymptotal relationship, right? Like how far are you up that?
Yes, yes, yes. In terms of like your potential development,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So, for people who are in more, let's say, intermediate or advanced training status, meaning they're past their newbie gains phase, they're further along towards their like quote unquote genetic potential. They've been training for a long period of time with hypertrophy principles at play and structured training programs and good quality stimulus, all that. There is a point where training at home might make it harder for you to make those incremental gains.
Definitely, I think so. Especially again for certain muscle groups like legs and back. If I have to think what I'm doing for my leg sessions or when I train back, there's no way I'm getting the same stimulus at home. I'm sorry. Okay, maybe side delts, I could do that. Some bicep stuff like
Mm-hmm.
triceps, I could get away with.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to those big muscle groups like back and legs, there's no way I would be making the same gains doing that at home.
And it's because it makes it harder for you to achieve those three core principles we discussed up
Exactly.
front. Getting enough volume in and having like maybe exercise variety to allow you to do the volume and then
Mm-hmm.
working number of sets with recovery principles at play. 2, challenge, right? For you, it is a lot of the load needing to be heavier. Or maybe sometimes it's the safety of training with a machine that allows you to push closer to failure, right? That you have in the gym that you won't have at home. Or 3, it was progression, right? You're past the point of progressing in the ways that you could have feasibly done at home. So that's why you kind of, for your goals, for your training status, you need to be in the gym.
Yeah, and it reaches a point of where practicality runs into an issue. Like you could do all those things, but what am I going to do? Sets of 100 of Bulgarian split squats with 30 seconds in between and like 10 sets. Like my cardio is going to give out before. It's just not practical at a certain point. I'm
And
going to
how much
hate it.
time is it going to
Like,
take you?
and how much time exactly that. It's like, yeah, so definitely not. So like for advanced people or people further along, and especially if you're a really strong person and maybe you have certain muscle groups where you're really trying to specialize with and you want certain machines, like even for example, my adductors were so lagging. I do a lot of like adductor machine. I can't really load them the same, at home. So like those types of scenarios, probably recommend going to.
Yep. And I think that also brings me into the concept of like training specificity, right? Depending on your goals, right? Today, this topic we're talking about is for building muscle, right? If your goal is to build specific muscles, like you said, specific muscle groups might benefit more from being in the gym just because they're harder to apply those 3 principles at home. You've talked about that a couple times now. But also, if you're looking to maintain muscle, it's different than building muscle. And if you're looking to lose body fat, again, we're going to talk about that next week, but that's also different set of criteria for evaluating whether or not working out from home is as valid for you.
Yes, good point. Good point.
So we do need to consider the specificity of your goals here. Okay. Is there anything else you want to discuss in terms of answering our question, can you build muscle with home workouts?
I don't think so. I think we covered some good stuff.
We basically answered it as like, yes, you can for sure. As long as you apply those 3 core principles, but there could be a time in which those 3 core principles become harder for you to apply. And then there are some limitations that home workouts, or again, as you framed up front, I'm going to keep coming back to limited equipment workouts because we have so many people who have full home gyms, right? Limited equipment workouts can become limiting.
Yeah. And again, as a general recommendation, I would recommend people just go to gym. Like for the most part, like unless you're in the entry stages into your fitness journey, then do whatever you need to do to get consistent, get started, and apply some basic principles. But once you're past that, I recommend most people just go to the gym for all those reasons, even if it's psychological, just changing your environment, having access to more things, you'll enjoy it more. There's just something about it.
You learn a lot too, I think, about how your body lifts and the subjective stimulus when you do have like some of the variety of experiences that you can unlock in the gym. So I think that's nice to have. We are talking about building muscle. So if we didn't talk about something that is actually not training related, it wouldn't be the most truthful perspective, and we're all about truth on Truth Talks. We have to remind people that training is the spark of muscle growth. So if you do want to build muscle, your training program does need to be set up in a way to allow you to do that. That is the first step, but it's not the only step. You were going to say that, weren't you?
Well, I was gonna say like, yeah, you cannot build a lot of muscle without a good training stimulus and addressing the principles we talked about. You're not going to nutrition your way to a good amount of muscle. Okay,
exactly.
But which leads us into what you need, right? We got to follow up with the nutrition, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, you and I, we spend too much time together. We think about the same things. So yes, training needs to be there. So if you are not doing any workouts from home, or you're not doing any workouts, period, then you can't be thinking about, oh yeah, I can still build muscle. You need to have that training program in check first. However, you also need your nutrition and lifestyle variables in check. So regardless of whether you are training from home with limited equipment or from a gym with a full equipment access, if you do not have your nutrition variables or your lifestyle variables like sleep and stress management in check, you're making building muscle a lot harder.
Yeah.
Amazing.
For sure.
Cool. Do you have a mindset perspective that you want to cover off today?
I think just reminding ourselves that our body doesn't know if you're at the beach, on a skyscraper, or at home, or at the gym. It just receives a certain inputs of stimuli, and then it makes adaptations in response to that stimuli. So
my body wishes it was at the beach right now.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Well, you might be with your volleyball. I don't know. You guys play a lot of beach volleyball.
We do play a lot of beach volleyball. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So.
So regardless of where you are, as long as you're applying a stimulus, and you made a great analogy too, in that in our episode on do you need to lift heavier to build muscle, you had a great analogy. Like, it doesn't matter if you're carrying water jugs around, they're still heavy, right? Like any sort of form of placing weight and stimulus on the muscle is going to drive an adaptation. That's what it comes down to, right? I also think as a follow-up to that, we covered this in our episode, do you need to squat to grow your legs? But there are no must-do exercises. So the at-home exercises can be just as productive if they adhere to those training variables. Yes. Exercise selection, equipment, All of that is just different tools in the toolbox to allow you to train in a way that's conducive to muscle growth.
Absolutely. And again, if you're listening to this and you have like a decent home setup, maybe even just the barbell, a bench, maybe a little bit of cable, some dumbbells, like then, you probably have most of the things that you need, for the most part. But I think we're talking more to the discussion of, when you have limited equipment and you're at home.
Yes, exactly. Let's say your home setup is like 1 or 2 sets of dumbbells and a mat and a couple of resistance bands or something like that, right? Then that scenario is more aligned with the criteria we're discussing today. If you have a fully stocked home gym, consider it a gym, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
for sure. Okay, amazing. So I think without further ado, we're going to wrap it up for this week. Please don't miss out on next week's episode where we talk about, can you actually lose fat with working out from home? So different application of the home or limited equipment context. We're going to dive into that one. So you don't want to miss that if that's one of your goals as well, or a future goal, even if you're currently focused on building muscle. Until then, we will leave you for this week and we will be back in your feeds with another episode of Truth Talks next Monday. In the meantime, have a great week. Bye for now.